Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering sealed deck building exercise. Today we're taking a look at the newest set, which is Shadows over Innistrad. So we've got 6 boosters. We will open all of them and then build a 40 card sealed deck as a bit of practice. So let's jump right into it. Let's get started with our first booster here. Let's zoom in a bit. Our first card is a Madness card, and it's Just a Wind. So we'll sort all the cards by color first here. Next up is Cathar's Companion, a Lamplighter of Selhoff, a Loam Dryad, a Rabbit Bite, Alms of the Vein, Reduce to Ashes, Confront the Unknown, and Deadweight, that's a good one. Spectral Shepherd as our first uncommon. Second uncommon, Manic Scribe. Final uncommon is a land in Forsaken Sanctuary. And our rare is Forgotten Creation. And our flip card is Pious Evangel, which transforms into Wayward Disciple. And a Human Cleric token. On to our next pack. Where we start out with Sleep Paralysis, Inquisitor's Ox, Silent Observer, Seagraph Scab, Vessel of Volatility, Thornhide Wolves, Rancid Rats, Fiery Tamper. We're getting some good removal here. Clip Wings, Moonlight Hunt as our first uncommon. Compelling Deterrence, Stone Quarry, another land, and our rare is Angel of Deliverance. And our flip card is Hermit of the Naturnals, which transforms into Lone Wolf of the Naturnals. Alright. And a clue token. On to pack number 3. Where we start out with Jace's Scrutiny, another Cathar's Companion, Stitched Mangler, Hound of the Farbogs, Stromkirk Mentor, Tormenting Voice, another Clipwings, Rotten Heart Ghoul, Murderous Compulsion, Our first uncommon is Dissension in the Ranks. Veteran Cathar. Grathmole. And our rare is a Prized Amalgam. And our flip card is a Harvest Hand that transforms into Scrounged Scythe. Alright. And the zombie token. On to pack number 4. Lead things off with a Vessel of Paramnesia, Angelic Purge, Press for Answers, Gone Missing, another Alms of the Vein, another Reduce to Ashes, another Confront the Unknown, another Deadweight, another Vessel of Volatility, and Gisa's Bidding is our first uncommon, followed by Call the Bloodline, then an Erdwall Illuminator, and our rare is a Brain in a Jar. And our flip card is a Solitary Hunter, which transforms into one of the pack. And another clue. On to pack number 5. I'll lead things off with another Lamplighter of Selhoff. We've got an Emissary of the Sleepless, Sleep Paralysis, another one, Warped Landscape to enable Delirium and for some mana fixing, Intrepid Provisioner, another Hound of the Farbogs, a Byway Courier, Grotesque Mutation, Structural Distortion, another Dissension in the Ranks as uncommon number 1, followed by Creeping Dread. Our last uncommon is a Ghoulsteed, and our rare is a Declaration in Stone, another great removal spell, and our flip card is a Gatstaff Arsonists, which transforms into Gatstaff Ravagers. Alright. And what do you know? Another clue. On to our final pack. Start things off with a Furtive Homunculus, another Angelic Purge, a Vessel of Paramnesia, another Hound, Senseless Rage, Another byway courier. Another mutation. Insolent neonate. Trail of Evidence as our first uncommon. Bound by Moonsilver, another great removal spell. Skeleton Key. And our rare is a Epiphany at the Drownyard. And our flip card is a Breakneck Rider. And the flip side of the rider is Neckbreaker. And a shiny Voldaran Duelist. Alright, and another clue. So now it's time to start building our sealed deck. I'll go over every color, get rid of the unplayable cards so we have a better idea what the good and bad colors are, maybe how deep they are, and then we can start building some decks and see how they look, maybe compare a few different builds and see which one we like the most. So let's get started with our white cards here. We've got Great Removal with double Angelic Purge bound by Moonsilver, Declaration in Stone, and a pretty good rare in Angel of Deliverance if we can get to the late game and enable Delirium. And then some other decent cards, for example the Pious Evangel is also pretty good. And Spectral Shepherd is also solid as just a 2/2 flyer for 3 mana. Inquisitor's Ox also a decent blocker if we want to go to the late game, and if we can enable Delirium it's even better. And then the 2 Cotharos Companion go better into a more aggressive deck, I guess, but they're still playable if we need more creatures. So white looks actually pretty decent here. A pretty low creature count, but pretty good removal. So if we pair it with the second color, we would need a lot more creatures to make this deck work. Let's take a look at blue. We've got Epiphany at the Drownyard, which is certainly playable. Trail of Evidence is a little bit slow, so I don't think we can really make this work, but we can always revisit it, but I'll put it on the side for now. Vessel of Paramnesia. It's only a card I would consider if we want to enable Delirium, otherwise I would avoid playing it, so I'll put it on the side for now. The Homunculus is playable, although most blue decks don't really want to be very aggressive, so it doesn't really fit into a lot of blue decks, but if we need a playable, it's fine. Sleep Paralysis is a decent removal spell, especially in sealed, where there's a lot of bombs running around. The Lamplighter is decent, especially when we have a few zombies. The Illuminator is fine as just a 2 mana 1/3 flyer, and if we have some clues going to investigate, it's even better. Gone Missing is decent removal. Press for Answers I'm not that impressed by, no pun intended. So the other Vessel can also go. Stitch Mangler is also solid. Jace the Scrutiny is actually also decent. You can just for 2 mana either gain 4 life basically, or maybe kill a creature in combat by blocking and then also investigate so you're not down on any cards. So a solid card. The Deterrence is also good, especially when we have a lot of zombies, maybe in blue-black. Seagraph Scab, not exciting, but if we need 2 drops, this can do the job. Also a zombie, of course. Silent Observer is a good defensive card. Another Sleep Paralysis, so even more removal here. The Forgotten Creation is also great. Manic Scribe, only a card that goes well into a mill deck, but we don't have any other mill cards, so I think we won't play this one. Another Lamplighter, so we have 2 of those. And Just the Wind. So looking at blue, we have some decent removal with double Sleep Paralysis, We've got some bounce spells in Compelling Deterrence and Just the Wind. Our creatures are pretty defensive here. We've got a lot of high toughness creatures with double Lamplighter, Illuminator, Scab, and Silent Observer, and then Forgotten Creation. So blue looks like a fine color, but again it's missing some creatures that can really get in for damage. Since these are all defensive creatures, we need some more high-powered creatures, maybe with some evasion here, especially in sealed. But yeah, maybe we can pair it with the second color. I think blue and white don't pair very well together, since again blue has a lot of defensive creatures and some removal, white mostly removal, so we're still missing those creatures that can close out the game. But maybe we find a second color that goes well with blue. So let's move on to black. We've got a Grotesque Mutation, which is a fine combat trick. Hound of the Farbogs, not a card I'm excited to play, but if we really need more playables, this can do. Ghoulsteed is fine. Creeping Dread, not a card I'm excited to play, so let's get rid of it. Another Mutation, another Hound. Call the Bloodline, decent if you have a lot of Madness cards, and if you have the skeleton that can return from the graveyard into your hand, it's pretty great. So we'll have to see how many Madness cards we end up with. And Gisa's Bidding is also great, also a Madness card to go with the Call the Bloodline, for example. Deadweight is great, of course. Cheap removal. Alms of the Vein, let's get out of here. Only good in a super aggressive deck, which we clearly are not gonna have here in sealed. Murderous Compulsion is also great, goes well with the Call the Bloodline, and if you can Madness this at instant speed, you can kill a creature that's attacking, so you don't even have to take damage from it. The Ghoul is not great, but if we really need more creatures, that can be fine. Same with the Mentor here. We won't have a ton of vampires, and a 4/2 for 4 mana is not exciting. But if we need more playables, he can still make the cut. Same here with the Hound, which we have 3 copies of. Rancid Rats is great, trades with a lot of stuff. And another Deadweight, which is good. And the Alms can get out. So taking a look at black, we have a lot of mediocre creatures. With the Ghoul, the Mentors, and the Hounds. We've got some removal in the Compulsion, double Deadweight, and we also get some combat tricks, a Gisa's Bidding, which I like, and the Rancid Rats. So black looks fine, but again the creatures are pretty weak for the most part, but removal is pretty solid, which seems to be the case in most of our colors so far. So let's move on to red, where we have a Duelist, which is a fine creature. The Breakneck Rider, which is fine. Insolent Neonate, only when you want to enable Madness, or if you have a heavy vampire theme. So we'll have to look into that later. Senseless Rage, also only a card I would consider if we can enable Madness at instant speed often enough, so that it kind of acts like a combat trick. Otherwise you run the risk of getting 2-for-1 like with most aura cards. The Arsonists is decent. Dissension in the Ranks, kind of difficult to set up. Can be a 2-for-1, but again it's pretty difficult to set this up since you need to target 2 blocking creatures, and then those have to be able to fight with each other and be able to hopefully kill each other. So not actually a card I want to play most of the time. So let's get it out. Structural Distortion, not a card I'm interested in, unless my opponent has some unbeatable artifacts. Vessel of Volatility, also bad. Reduce to Ashes, decent removal. Dissension can go. Tormenting Voice is great, especially with all the Madness cards. Fiery Temper is great, with and without Madness. Another vessel can get out of here, and reduce to ashes, also fine. So again here we have kind of the same problem as in our other colors, which is we have a lot of removal, double reduce to ashes, fiery temper, but we're missing some quality creatures. Only really have the arsonist and the breakneck rider as good creatures here, and I guess the duelist is also fine. So yeah, hopefully green has some creatures, because we're gonna need them. So let's move on to green, where we have the courier, which is a decent creature. Have 2 of those. The provisioner is fine, especially if you have a lot of humans. The hunter is a decent creature. We've got confront the unknown, which is actually pretty good. You get a clue and +1/+1, and if you have multiple clues, you get more than just +1/+1. So a decent combat trick. Graph Mole is pretty good. Even as just a 2/4 for 3 mana, you could do worse. And then if you have some clues going, you can gain some life. The Cathar is fine if you're in green-white, or if you just need a 2-drop if you're just green. Although there's usually better options if you're just green. Clipwing's not a card I'm interested in. Could be a sideboard card, but with all those spirit tokens, it's not even that great most of the time. So let's get it out of here. Hermit of the Netherknolls is fine. Moonlight Hunt, only good if we have, like, I would say 8 or 9 wolves, then it becomes really good. Of course, wolves or werewolves. If we have less than 6, then I would just not play this, because then we'll not be able to use it reliably enough. But as soon as we get to that 7+ range, it becomes a good card. Another Clipwings, which can go. Thornhide Wolves, just a solid creature. Another Confront the Unknowns, so we have 2 of those. The Rabbit Bite is also pretty good, especially if you have a lot of large creatures. And Loam Dryad, I think, is pretty bad. So that leaves us with at least some creatures here in green, which is a good news, since we didn't really have a ton of creatures in our other colors. So we've got a wolves and 2 removal spells, one of which we can play if we have enough wolves to support it, and then 2 Confront the Unknown, which can be good. And otherwise a decent curve of creatures here, with some humans, some werewolves, and yeah. Not a ton of werewolves actually, so I don't think this Moonlight Hunt will make the cut. So green looks to be the color with the best creatures so far, at least. Taking a look at our artifacts, we've got a Skeleton Key, which is decent if you've got some madness going perhaps, and if you have a lot of cheap creatures. Brain in a Jar is not a card I would recommend playing. And Harvest Hand is fine, as it's a cheap creature that then turns into an equipment, which is not great, but better than nothing most of the time. And then our lands, we've got a Stone Quarry, a Forsaken Sanctuary, and a Warped Landscape. So if we do end up in these 3 colors, we could actually make our mana base pretty great, since this is a lot of fixing. So we'll have to wait and see if we end up in these colors, or maybe just 2 of them. And then the Prized Amalgam, which is just a 3/3 for 3 mana, which is not bad. And then has some other text as well. But that text is not going to be too relevant most of the time. But if we're blue-black, I would certainly just play it. Alright, so now that we sorted out all the colors, I think it's time to build some decks. So the colors I'm gonna start with here, I think, is I want to try out the green and then combine it with one of the other colors. I think white might be our best second color. Blue is certainly the deepest color we have. And then black and red Red was a bit light on cards, although we did have some pretty good ones in Reduce to Ashes and Fiery Temper. So maybe we can also splash some of those cards. So first I'm going to try green, maybe combine it with white and see if we can maybe splash a third color if that's possible. So see you back in a bit. Alright, welcome back. So this is how our green-white plus red splash deck would look like. So as you can see, we don't have a ton of 2-drop creatures, which is one of the main issues with this deck, since if you're up against someone casting a werewolf on turn 2, if you can't play 2-drop yourself when on the draw, then you could be in trouble. So we're a bit heavy on the 3-drops here, as you can see, but we do have some decent removal. We've got Declaration in Stone, Rabbit Bite, double Angelic Purge, bound by Moonsilver, and the red splash also gives us access to double Reduce to Ashes, which we can support with Stone Quarry plus Warp Landscape. And taking a look at the other red cards, there's no other red cards I would be interested to play on the splash, since Fiery Temper, if you don't have ways to discard it reliably, is not a good splash card since it's double red. And if we're playing more than 2 red cards, we're not really splashing red, we're actually playing a third color, which I want to avoid. So this is how the deck would look like currently. We do have the late game of Angel of Deliverance, although we don't have a ton of ways to get Delirium, since we don't have a lot of ways to discard cards, for example, or mill our own cards. So it will be a little bit tricky to enable Delirium, but we do have some instants, some sorceries, and even an enchantment. Plus Harvest Hand could also end up in the graveyard, since we could sacrifice it with our own Angelic Purge. And we can also sacrifice our own lands with Angelic Purge to enable Delirium, plus we have the Warped Landscape. And of course, creatures should not be too difficult to get in the graveyard. And then with Angelic Purge we can actually also sacrifice our clue tokens, since we do have double Confront the Unknown, 2 Byway Couriers, among other things. And a cool thing about that is, even when we sacrifice a clue token with the Angelic Purge, we still gain the life from the Graph Mole, even though we didn't draw a card with the clue token. And then we also have the Cathar, of course, which we are green-white and we have some humans, so we can actually use the activated ability to give something double strike, which is nice. So currently we are playing with 18 lands, and I think that's a bit much. So I think I would like to add one more card, and the options here for our final card are either a Cathar's Companion or just a Spectral Shepherd without a blue mana, so just a 2/2 flyer for 3 mana, which I think here is going to be better than the Cathar's Companion, since we already have a lot of creatures that can hold down the fort on the ground. And with not a ton of non-creature spells at instant speed, the Cathar's Companion doesn't look great. So we're a little light on threats perhaps, but hopefully the removal makes up for that. And we also have some clue tokens that can draw us into some more cards in the late game. So yeah, I mean, this deck is certainly playable, but let's take a look if we can maybe find a better deck in different colors. So catch you back in a bit. Welcome back. So this is how the blue-green deck would look like. This is a deck that has the most synergy with all the clues we're making, since we have the Illuminator, which whenever we investigate, we can investigate an additional time, and Graph Mole, whenever we sacrifice a clue, we can gain 3 life. And we do have a decent amount of cards that make clues here. In Confront the Unknown, we've got Jace's Scrutiny, which makes a clue token. The Byway Couriers, when they die, they make a clue. And we also have Gone Missing, that makes a clue. So a pretty decent amount of card advantage in the clues. Of course, one of the risks of making all these clues is that you may fall behind on board and you're spending too much mana sacrificing clues to draw cards. And then you may end up losing with a bunch of clues in play or a bunch of cards in hand. But this deck actually is pretty good at establishing a nice defense with the Scab and the Illuminator early. We've got a few bounce spells here and a few creatures with pretty high toughness in the early game. as well as the Silent Observer, which is a good flying defender. In this deck, what I like is that we have a few sideboard options. So there's a few cards that we could play if we wanted to. The Moonlight Hunt still doesn't look great since we're pretty light on wolves and werewolves, so probably not that one. But we do have some 2-drops that we could sideboard in if we're up against an aggressive deck with a lot of 2-drop werewolves. We could side in the Cathar or the Homunculus, just so we have a turn to play and maybe we can block those creatures. Could even see playing one of these in the main deck over maybe one of our more expensive cards. We also have a Harvest Hand, which we could side in together with the Cathar, maybe together with the Plains, since we do have the Warp Landscape which we could play, and Cathar plus Harvest Hand. If we can activate the ability is a nice combination, and if we do side in the Cathar with the Harvest Hand, we might also want to side in the Provisioner, which did not make the cut since we don't have a ton of humans, but once we add the Cathar and the Provisioner himself, we do have a decent amount of humans that also synergize with the transformed Scrounged Scythe. So I think that's a nice sideboard package that we could bring in against certain decks, and that versatility we didn't really have with the previous build. So yeah, I don't hate the look of this deck. We also have a bit of zombie synergy here with Mangler, double Lamplighter, and the Compelling Deterrence. I'm not sure if we should play the Warp Landscape if we're just blue-green and don't have any Delirium, so putting this in the graveyard doesn't really help us out any. But I guess the Warp Landscape is still fine as just a way to maybe thin out our deck in the late game. And we don't have a lot of double colored cards, actually we don't have any. All the cards in our deck are either single green or single blue, so we don't really need it for mana fixing in that sense. So I could also see just not playing the Warp Landscape and playing an additional basic land instead. And in this deck I would probably play one more island than forest, since we do want to play the Scab and the Illuminator early. So yeah, that's blue-green. I don't hate the look of the deck, but maybe we can find one more build and call it a day. Alright, welcome back. So this is how our blue-white deck would look like, and it's looking pretty spicy. We actually have a decent amount of ways to enable Delirium, which makes our Angel of Deliverance and Inquisitor's Ox a lot better. And we have a decent amount of removal here. From white we get Declaration in Stone, Angelic Purge, Bound by Moonsilver, and in blue we have some bound spells, some Sleep Paralysis, Gone Missing, and some card advantage in Epiphany at the Drownyard. We have a decent amount of flyers thanks to the Illuminator, the Shepherd, the Silent Observer, the Emissary, and the Angel of Deliverance. We have a lot of defensive creatures here with the Inquisitor's Ox, Silent Observer, the 2 Lamplighters. We have the zombie synergies we talked about with the Scab, the Mangler, the Creation, and the double Lamplighter plus Compelling Deterrence. And we actually have a lot of other cards that we could play for the last few slots in a deck, so that gives us a bit more flexibility. So we could play another copy of Angelic Purge, although we already have one, and we have Bound by Moonsilver, which both let us sacrifice permanents if we want to, which can help with Delirium. But of course, if you start sacrificing too many permanents, that becomes a problem. Since we don't have a ton of expendable permanents we can sacrifice, since we don't have a lot of clues in this deck, and we don't want to sacrifice too many lands because we do want to get up to 8 mana for the Angel of Deliverance. We could play another Cathar's Companion, since we do have some more instants here to make the Companion good, but this one doesn't look too appealing to me. We could play another Jace's Scrutiny, which is another instant to go with the Companion to enable his ability, and another way to get a clue that we can sacrifice to Angelic Purge, for example. So these two, or actually these 3 cards, could go well together if we bring them in, but then I'm not sure what we could take out. We could also bring in the Homunculus. Again, if our opponent is playing a lot of 2-drop werewolves, we might want to have an early play with the Homunculus. And then we could also actually play some black cards if we wanted to, since we have Warp Landscape plus the Forsaken Sanctuary. Now when it comes to splashing black cards, the Prized Amalgam is not the best splash card, just because it's not super relevant when you draw it into the late game. It's not gonna really impact the board state that much, since it's basically just a 3/3 for 3 mana, which is a zombie with some synergies in our deck, but otherwise not the most exciting splash card. One that I'm a little bit more interested in is the Murderous Compulsion, since it has Madness and we have a decent amount of ways here to discard some cards to enable Madness, and it's only a single black, and in the late game it's still a decent removal spell, so you're happy to draw it late and it's pretty impactful. So I could see adding the Murderous Compulsion. We could technically also play these Deadweights, but Deadweight is not a card that's very powerful on the splash, just because if you play it late, giving a creature -2/2 is not going to make a big difference if that creature's enormous, so it's not going to stop the opponent's bombs. So that's why I like the Murderous Compulsion a lot more. So we could technically play the Deadweights, but I'm not a huge fan if black is not our primary color. And taking a look at black, I think I can conclude that besides these removal spells and maybe the Rancid Rats and Ghoulsteed, and I guess Gisa's Bidding is also fine, but I mean black is just not very good. The creatures with Triple Hound, the Mentor, the Ghoul, they're not that great, and I don't think black really wants to be your primary color here, even though it's got some decent cards. I think blue-white might be the way to go. So it's definitely between blue-white and the blue-green deck. Blue-white does offer us some more evasion than the blue-green deck, and flying is pretty important in sealed to try and close out games. We also have pretty good removal in blue-white, more so than in blue-green. The thing that green has going for it, of course, is that it has some pretty large creatures that can help close out the game. But we do have some good defensive cards here as well. So even the larger creatures should not be a huge problem for this deck. So if we want to play the Compulsion, we definitely have to play a Swamp to go with the Landscape. And we also have the Sanctuary, and I think that's enough to support the Compulsion. And then we would have to remove one more card here. I could see maybe getting rid of the Scab, although it's an early play that also synergizes with the Lamplighter. So maybe we don't cut the Scab, maybe we could remove the Cathar's Companion. I could also see cutting the Harvest Hand, but I like the Harvest Hand because it's an artifact for Delirium and we can easily sacrifice it to the Bound by Moonsilver or Angelic Purge to get it into our graveyard even when it's transformed. So we get the value from our 2/2, then it transforms into the equipment, and if we don't need it we can just sacrifice it to one of the effects. So yeah, this is probably the deck I would go for. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. Maybe you see a better build in this sealed pool. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.